Kids, doing drugs is not cool. It's never a good thing. It's never a good thing to stimulate yourself with things that aren't natural. Wait. Take that, mental illness. Hello my friends and welcome to Youth Potential, a place where we talk about all sorts of things related to mental health. Whether you feel good or whether you feel meh, this place is for you. Also, I've got an Instagram account, please go and check that out. Hello my friend, Scott here representing Youth Potential. Today we're going to be talking about self-harm and drug addiction. We're going to be discussing whether it soothes us, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about self-harm scars towards the end of the video. So someone who has been viewing and subscribed to this channel suggested these topics for the video. I thought it was a good idea to kind of talk about them, even though I've already kind of touched upon drug addiction and obviously spoken loads about self-harm here on this channel. But I thought I'd touch on the subjects kind of combined together, in the sense that self-harm and drug addiction have a lot in common, don't they? Anyone who's had experience with both self-harm and drug addiction, I'm sure you can agree with what I'm saying. So in the past, I've had issues with self-harm and acute drug addiction. I think drug addiction was more for my late teens and early 20s, whereas self-harm for me has been kind of on and off over the past 18 years. So in regards to discussing them and asking the question, does self-harm and having a drug addiction soothe? And if so, how? Honestly, I would simply say yes, they do soothe. But, and there is a big but, if you think that self-harm and or using drugs is like a way to actually soothe, if you think that that's a good idea, then that's kind of looking at it like looking at the big picture through just a tiny little window. And what I mean by that is that self-harm and taking drugs merely appear to soothe us, and they appear to soothe us by taking away any emotional or mental pain and replacing it with a synthetic happy feeling. So for example, if you're feeling low and, you know, life's been a bit too much recently, it's quite easy to slip into a place, if you are someone who uses drugs to escape, it's so easy to just think, okay, I'm gonna take whatever drugs it is that that person takes, and when they take it, it takes away that pain, doesn't it? If you've had experience, I'm sure you can agree with me. But the problem there is that it's not naturally bringing about a positive feeling. It's merely synthetic. And it's no different with self-harm. You know, you have that emotional or mental pain, you know, you have like these terrible thoughts or intense feelings run through you, and you resort to self-harm because it gives that instant kind of gratification. But it's not dealing with the problem though, is it? It's merely trying to battle the effects rather than discovering the cause and working through that. So if you're using drugs, for example, or you've got a drug addiction, however you want to look at it, your brain's going to be under constant strain. It's going to be constantly trying to defend itself from the unhealthy imbalancing of brain chemicals. Because much like self-harm, using drugs alters your state of mind. It alters the chemicals that are flowing around up there, and it's not normal. it's not healthy for your brain. It's kind of like almost giving your brain a form of steroid. And whether you're taking hard drugs or you're self-harming or both, not necessarily at the same time, your state of mind is constantly under attack. And that's obviously down to the intense changes in your brain's chemicals. Obviously, I mean, I personally would say that self-harm is less dangerous than taking drugs when it comes to creating an imbalance of brain chemicals. But if I'm perfectly honest, I can't verify that 100%, but I would say that when you self-harm and different brain chemicals are sloshing about up there, I think that's going to be a little less dangerous than taking some sort of synthetic drug. But your mind being under attack, it's not always a conscious thing. Sometimes it's a subconscious thing. I think when we self-harm or even take drugs as a way of controlling our pain, the effects of that aren't always something that we can recognise. And that's why I say sometimes it's a subconscious thing. And that's probably down to the fact that our attention is more focused on the idea that self-harm or drugs attempt us to make an attempt at forgetting the pain. And that's where it becomes difficult, because our noses are so close to the grindstone, so to speak. We can't see the big picture. And the only thing our attention is on is taking those drugs or self-harming and just relying on it that much. You know, it becomes an addiction, it becomes an obsession, it becomes the default setting. And when that's the case, you're really in deep, you're really in the shit there. So yeah, self-harm and drugs appear to get rid of the pain, but in reality, the pain's always going to be there until we learn to deal with it. And I know that's not an easy thing to do, and it's not something that can be done quickly, but no amount of self-harm or amount of drug use will make us forget any traumas that we've experienced. They just can't. And we're left remembering the trauma. But real self-soothing, natural self-soothing comes from understanding and acceptance of our circumstances and situations. Adjusting ourselves to that, and then using that as a foundation to kind of move forward with more constructive habits. I know that, as I say, that's not something that can be done overnight. It's not something that can be done quickly. But when we find other ways of coping that don't involve self-harm or drug use, we begin to form, as I say, more constructive habits. It's just repetition, 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 repetition. That doesn't necessarily mean every time you slip up and relapse with drugs or self-harming that you're back to square one, okay? I keep saying this, you're not back to square one if you slip up, all right? But you've got to still keep putting in that repetition of trying to understand yourself, understand the circumstances, not blame yourself for things. So, the final part of this video is answering the question, how do I feel about self-harm scars? And again, I thank you to the subscriber that has suggested this. So, for me, self-harm scars, I become, and I've noticed this recently where I've changed jobs, I become a little bit more self-conscious when I am in a place with people that I don't know too well or don't know at all. I get a little bit, not defensive, I would say, and not secretive either, just kind of conservative a little bit, I suppose would be the right term. I wouldn't make it obvious. I wouldn't walk around with like arms out and just being like, hey, look at this, blah, 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 blah. It'd be a case of I'm just going to go about my day, mind my own business, and if people look, yeah, it probably does make me feel uncomfortable. I had a situation at work a little while ago in my new job, where someone was asking me, you know, why haven't you got tattoos on your other arm? And they didn't obviously notice my scars or whatever, because they've got to a stage now where you don't notice them unless you're standing within a metre of me. And she said, yeah, why haven't you got any tattoos on that arm? And I said, you know, it's a long story. And I just kind of left it at that. I didn't want it to open a can of worms or lead to anything else. And she said, oh, you know, is there something wrong with it? And I was just like, no, just don't. It was just so awkward, really, really awkward. But when people do things like that to me, I know they're not being derogatory, they're just kind of unaware or ignorant to some extent, so I don't want to make them feel stupid. It's the summer now, it's a really hot time of year, it's almost impossible to feel comfortable whilst covering up any scars. But as I say, I'm quite fortunate where my arm's a little bit hairy, so it kind of covers a lot of it. But the fact that I have to live with these scars for the rest of my life, you know, for some time it did bother me, but these days it doesn't. You know, I have them on various parts of my body, some are more visible than others, but most of the time I can just look at them and think, you know, I've been through some shit and I've learned to deal with it. Doesn't mean I have an easy time thinking about the past, because I don't a lot of the time, but you know, I can feel proud of myself for some of the things I have done, for some of the things I have achieved, and I try not to let this slightly deformed layer of skin get the better of me. Most people these days, I think, are quite considerate, you know, unless someone's just being an arsehole or a troll. I think most of the time people are more accepting of it these days, which I'm really grateful for. So yeah, that's how I feel about my self-harm scars. You know, it's not always been that easy to be accepting of them, but that just comes with age, I think. There'll be times when I don't like them that much, but most of the time I just kind of forget about them, and that's the truth. Okay, thank you very much for watching, everybody. You take care of yourselves, stay hydrated in this heat because it is absolutely ridiculous. I say that and I'm drinking a coffee. Right, take care everyone, all the best.